I am Tirantha Walaliyadde, the President's Counsel of the Supreme Court of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. For the past 10 or 15 years, this channel, the Sinhale channel, has been running, and I have concentrated on local government and local politics, the COVID pandemic, the COVID injections, and the economical situation of this country. And I have been critical of many governmental decisions taken in those areas. But recently I met a person, a character, an internationally recognized intellectual and a politician who spoke to me or discussed with me about international situations, geopolitical situation of Sri Lanka in times of war, in times of peace, American, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Russian interests in Sri Lanka, and the trade lines going through Sri Lanka. He is a mild man who was the first elected Sri Lankan to the British Parliament long years ago, and then he became a member of the European Parliament, and he had legislated to quite a number of international situations. His name is Niranjan de Silva Deva, Aditya, the first elected Sri Lankan to the British Parliament. He has worked with kings, princes, prime ministers and presidents. But he reminded me, as I discussed with him for a long time, of a verse in Rudyard Kipling's famous poem, If. It said, if you can walk with kings and still not lose the common touch, you are a man, my son. I present to you Niranjan de Silva Deva, Aditya. Well, he had mild ideas, conservative ideas, until he met me. Listen to him. He has a wide experience in these matters and is internationally recognized as a knowledgeable and capable personality. I give you now Niranjan de Silva Deva, Aditya. Mr. Deva, Aditya, what is your present position in England?
Oh, in England, I am a big X. I am an ex-member of the British Parliament, the first non-white conservative member of the British Parliament since the decolonisation period. I was the first Asian non-white member of the European Parliament, where I served for 20 years. Legislating for 500 million people in 26 countries, and the European Parliament was very powerful. It did more than 50%. In fact, in a book I wrote, I estimated that 70% of the legislation that a member state like France, Germany or whatever is made in the European Parliament and the balance in the national parliament. So for 20 years I did that, and this is one of the reasons why the British decided that enough was enough and voted for Brexit. But that's another story. So your question is that I'm a former member of the European Parliament, Vice President of the Development Committee, former member of the British Parliament. I'm still Deputy Lieutenant for the Lord Lieutenancy of London, which means I represent His Majesty the King and Her Majesty the King in various occasions when they want me to. But since I've retired, I'm 75, I've retired from official function. And then, what else am I? I'm of something new, a new global organization which we have created right around the world called the Commonwealth Union, to bring the 56 countries of the Commonwealth together, just like the European Union did, to bring the Commonwealth together as a union.
Now, Mr. Deva, Aditya, do you think this present government, this Walaliyadde, will last for 5 years?
Of course it will. It has got a huge majority, and the people of this country voted in massive numbers to elect both the current president and the current parliament. When a voter votes, they have self-respect. They are not just cannon fodder. They are people who want to respect themselves. So when they vote for a party, they have a reluctance to admit that they have made a mistake, and they will not. It takes about 2 or 3 elections for them to realize that. And I've been through this cycle many times. I've been in the British and European Parliament now for more than 30 years. So, and played a role in British politics for 40 years. So I do happen to know, and I do believe, that a voter, when he changes his vote and votes for a new party or a new group, want to believe that they made the right decision. So they will not acknowledge that they made a wrong move within 5 years. It will take a long time. And this government has, as I see at the moment, no reason to be concerned. They haven't done anything wrong. And electors realize when governments do wrong. So far, since this current government was elected, I see no wrong. In fact, I see some very good things happening.
Why is India interested in Sri Lanka?
Have you looked at a map of Sri Lanka in the global map? Sri Lanka is one of the most strategic locations in the world.
In terms of?
In terms of trade, in terms of airspace, in terms of positioning. Why do you think the Portuguese, the Dutch and the British came and took Sri Lanka? Because they liked us. We fell in love with our food or our music or our ladies. No, it was the strategic location of Sri Lanka that controlled the trade between the East and the West. Nearly 50% of global trade between the East and the West goes past Sri Lanka, only 4 kilometers away. Anyone controlling Sri Lanka controls that trade. Airspace, the seabed, all this is strategically important. So everyone is interested in Sri Lanka. Anyone who is someone, and of course India is a world power now. So is the United States, and so is China. And that's why the British were here, the Dutch were here, and the Portuguese.
What do you think of Sri Lanka's geopolitical placement in terms of war?
Whose war? Our war or other people's war?
Anybody's war.
Well, Sri Lanka's strategic location makes it a prime prize for any power. We have to recognize that we are only 80 kilometers away from India, and India is going to be a global power. We can't and we should not ever take on India. It's just absurd. Neither should we take on any other world power. So what we should do is balance our strategic interests. A chap called Lord Palmerston once said, Britain doesn't have permanent friends or permanent enemies. Britain has permanent interests. So I think we should start a debate about what is and what are Sri Lanka's interests. There is no conversation about this. Both economic, strategic, political, geopolitical. What are Sri Lanka's interests? And unify the entire country under those interests that serves everyone. Because our country, this country is a bit lost. It needs to be unified as Sri Lankans. All are Sri Lankans. And then promoting a Sri Lankan interest like the British do. What are British interests? The British Prime Minister 8 months ago was an Indian boy, Indian young man. Boris Johnson comes from a Turkish background. The leader of the Conservative Party today, Kemi Badenoch, is from Nigeria. But they are British because they define and promote and support and uphold British interests. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background is. It doesn't matter who your grandfather was or which school he went to. What does matter is what are your interests that promote and protect the collective group of Sri Lankans and protect them in the future. That is what should happen through a national debate where everyone gets involved. That's what happened with Britain in Brexit. There was a national debate and they decided by a very narrow margin that British interest was better served outside Europe. So that sort of debate, that sort of discussion doesn't take place in Sri Lanka. I don't hear it. I don't hear it in Parliament. I don't hear it in informed dinner parties. They all gossip about what somebody is doing, but not about what our national interests are.
What do you think of the economic situation in Sri Lanka?
I have to say that my friend Mr. Wickramasinghe came in. Ranil Wickramasinghe came into the breach when no one else was willing to do it or had the courage to step up to the plate as a baseball player would say and hit the ball. And he actually stabilized the country and brought about a period of stability with much pain. Every time the IMF goes somewhere, it makes the leaders of that country who implement those policies very unpopular because it is hard to put back something that is broken. The economy was broken, so you have to put it back. That is painful. But the person who is putting it back gets very unpopular. Okay. Mr. Wickramasinghe, Ranil Wickramasinghe knew that. But he did what had to be done. Like Margaret Thatcher did, to put the British economy back.
Do you think that you could have done without the IMF?
No, you can't do without the IMF because you have to be a part of the global financial system. You can go it alone, like Burma, yeah, great, look where they are. But if you are in a global economy and it's broken as far as you're concerned, and you can't borrow any money, and your credit rating is dire, then you have to get your credit rating up to keep going. And that was the biggest problem we had. For a long time, Sri Lanka had a very good credit rating, so you could borrow, and as anybody does, to fund future development. Suddenly our credit rating collapsed, and therefore Sri Lanka couldn't borrow. So it went to where it went to, and it became a default nation. Now, with the steady hand that I see this government employing and not disturbing the arrangements with the IMF and actually encouraging the IMF to give the next tranche of money, the economy could stabilize and soon the country's credit rating could go to a level where the current finance minister could go and apply for international loans and people will give because they know that there is stability, predictability and certainty. That's what everyone wants. Investors, lenders, all want stability and predictability.
Do you think that the people can, the public, the general public, not the millionaires, do you think that they can withstand this cost of living?
No. I have been very touched and very concerned about how prices are rising and incomes are not. But incomes can only rise when productivity rises, and productivity can only rise when investments go up. The foreign direct investments into Sri Lanka is dire. You can't grow the country out of this situation just by projecting 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% growth. They'll be there for 50 years before that. What you need to do is to bring foreign investment in. Let me tell you some few facts. We all talk about Vietnam's miracle or China's miracle. Do you know how much money came into China in foreign direct investments so that they could now become as rich as they are? $3.7 trillion in 20 years. Vietnam got $380 billion to achieve the growth that they have done. You need investment, foreign direct investment coming in to grow the economy. That's when productivity goes up. That's when the capital markets work. You have to create capital. I will give you an example. I was, as I said to you earlier, working with Margaret Thatcher before I became a member of the British Parliament. And I was working for the Deputy Prime Minister. One day, the Prime Minister Thatcher said, right, I'm going to give the 7 million council house tenants their house. We said, what? Yes. They have been paying rent, some over 20 years, but they have no asset. So I'm going to turn the rents they have paid over the years into a mortgage payment, and I'm going to give them their council houses and send them a title deed. Guess what happened? Now people talk about inflation, M3, M1, money, printing money. She didn't print money. She created capital. Suddenly 7 million people had capital, and the number of the value of a council house at that time was about 200 to 300,000 pounds. Multiply that figure. 300,000 into 7 million. She created that capital. And what did these guys do? They got a title deed, and suddenly they had 300,000 pounds worth of assets. They took the title deed to the bank and said, hey, I own this apartment now, or this flat. I'm worth 300,000 pounds because this piece of paper says I do. I want to borrow 150,000 pounds to set up a garage, a hairdressing salon, a small welding unit. And suddenly the economy boomed because she created capital. That's the trick. The greatest story of development in the world is the United States. In 250 years, those people who were refugees from Europe went to the United States. And 250 years ago, New York had nothing. There were no streets, no houses, no apartments. And today, what it is. How did they do that? The Americans didn't have IMF, World Bank, international aid, and yet they created the richest country in the world. How? by turning property rights into capital. You want me to carry on? Everybody wants to be close to Sri Lanka for reasons I explained earlier, our strategic location. Of course, China is interested. China has as they perceive it, they're one of the oldest and one of the greatest powers in human history. The Chinese imperial period goes back to 4,000 years. China was the largest and most powerful country in the world for how long? For about 95% of that time. It's only in the last 300 years, out of a history of 3,000 years, that the West became powerful. And now it's all changing. The West is not as powerful as they were. In fact, there are some of those Western countries who had empires. Portugal is a middle-income country. Holland is another middle-income country. And United Kingdom, where I lived and did my politics, is still a powerful country, but struggling to maintain its global presence.
China is a communist country. Right?
Oh, really?
Is it not?
Do you have free hospitals in China? If you fall ill, do you go to hospital and are you treated free? No. You have to pay. If you go to university in China, do you get free lessons and tuition? No. You have to pay. If you go to school in China, do you get free education? Yes, you do, until you're 40. After that, you have to pay. Vietnam.
What you say is China is not a communist country.
China is a capitalist country. As Deng Xiaoping said, I don't care what color the cat is as long as it catches mice. And that's the great change that happened in China. It's a communist party that runs one of the most powerful capitalist economies. Let me look at Sri Lanka is actually a communist country in comparison to China and Vietnam. Right now, you have free education, free hospital treatment, and guess what? If you go 100 kilometers in China using the same petrol that we use in a bus, you have to pay 2,000 to 3,000 rupees for 100 kilometers. If you do that in Vietnam, you have to pay 4,000 rupees. If you do it in an intercity bus in Sri Lanka, you pay 800 rupees. Sri Lanka has and I repeat this, the cheapest public transport system in the world. So here is a country with free or almost free, cheap public transport, free schools, free hospitals. Well, what do you call this?
What you say, Sri Lanka is more communist than China?
Of course it is. And it's bankrupt because it's spending more than it's earning.
Who is a communist? What is communism?
Communism, I don't want to go there. Communism is stupid. There's not a single successful communist country in the world. China is a capitalist country. Vietnam is a capitalist country. Russia is not a communist country.
What is the global power in next decade?
What do you think of the LTTE and a separate state?
Do you really know why the LTTE got created? It was created by Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and they were trained by Indian brigadiers. And why was suddenly India training young, dispossessed, poor Tamil children, young people in the north. What was it about? Well, I'll tell you what it was about. It was about President Jawadna not giving Trincomalee to the American 6th Fleet. At that time, India had the strongest relationship with the Soviet Union, and Pakistan the strongest relationship with the United States. And India was protecting Soviet interests at that time. Things have changed so much now. So that when President Jawadna foolishly, and I say foolishly because I was there and I knew him and I knew what he did, offered Trincomalee to the American 6th Fleet, the Indians went ballistic. So they had to sanitize the north and the east. And how did they do it? Well, you know how they did it. A terrible bloody war that prevented the American fleet or anybody's fleet coming to the north and the east. I told one of your presidents once, "Sir, why don't you mine Trincomalee and everybody will leave you alone?" Because everybody wants their hands on it. Just like the British did, just like the Dutch did, and just like the Portuguese did. Germany is not powerful. Germany is on its uppers. German industry is collapsing. German cars are not being sold. They are trying to put tariff barriers to prevent Chinese electric vehicles coming into Germany. Germany has done some very extraordinarily strange things. Germany and France are divided by the River Rhine, and I used to sit in the Strasbourg Parliament for 20 years, the European Parliament headquartered in Strasbourg. And the River Rhine is about 100 meters. On the other side is France. 70% of France's energy comes from nuclear power. On this side was Germany, and there was a mix of nuclear and coal and oil providing electricity to Germany. What happened? The German Chancellor decided to get rid of all the nuclear power. And I happened to get so annoyed about this that I wrote to her and I said, "Have you got some secret arrangement with the wind that if the one French nuclear power station blows up, which is why you're so scared, and got rid of your German power stations, nuclear power stations, the wind would not come to Germany?" It's so unbelievable. And what she did eventually was that she made Russia the supplier of gas and oil to fuel German electricity. One of those extraordinary decisions, like the one she also did about opening up the borders to 1 million people from the Middle East to come and settle in Germany overnight. There are some extraordinary decisions that were made in Germany. When I was making laws for Germany. 60% of the laws that affected the German people was made in the European Parliament with people like me. And I was thinking, why is she doing this? Well, now the chickens have come home to roost. The Russians, the Ukraine war, German energy security is all at stake. And I'm afraid these issues cannot be controlled that easily. No, he's going.
Now, seems that Donald Trump has closed his borders, American borders, to foreigners, to Asians.
Well,
What do you think of that?
President Trump has closed his borders because every country closes its borders. Sri Lanka doesn't have to do it because we are an island. So unless you swim abroad here, it's very difficult to get here. But when you have an open border with a lot of poor countries in the south, they want to come and get jobs, whether or not you get permission. So there's a difference between coming with permission and coming without permission. And hundreds of thousands, millions of poor people in the South came to find jobs in the United States without permission. So naturally, he had to build a wall, a border. And the world said, "Ooh, what a terrible thing to do." Why? He has to protect his borders. And the second issue that I understand that has been one of the factors is drugs. Drugs. Destroying American lives. All young, lots and lots of young people hooked on this terrible thing. And it comes across because of open borders. So naturally, he needed to protect his borders. Like you would protect your water with a wall එකක් දාලා නැත්නම් security guard දාලා protect කරනවා. Why shouldn't the president protect his borders?
Sri Lanka, if the cost of living goes beyond tolerance levels, what do you think the people will do? That is a complex question.
Well, my dear sir, I have to disagree with you on the word you use. There is no tolerance level for poor people. They just suffer. There isn't a line in the sand. And it's one of the greatest tragedies of our world, time, that some of the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
If the suffering becomes intolerable, what do you think the people will do?
They need a safety net. But under the current circumstances, the IMF won't allow expenditure.
That does not answer the question. I'm asking the Sri Lankan public, general public, in the outskirts of the regions, if the suffering level, as you say, goes beyond tolerance, what do you think the people will do? That is the question.
What would they do? Because they are a traditional Buddhist country, they will rationalize it and say it's their karma. Sri Lanka has always been, sadly, a country of acceptance. You accept your fate. You don't kick against your fate. You don't fight your karma. You accept it as some sort of Theravada Buddhist explanation of what's going to happen in your next life. And
now, as I remember correctly, the JVP rose up against the government in 71, 87, 88, 89. They were also Buddhist.
yes,
What do you think of that?
they tried to, in those periods, and I was here, I used to come and go, they tried to
Overwhelm a government by force.
yes, but you need to understand why. Because they had nothing better to do, but because they wanted to right the injustices they saw happening under their eyes. But extraordinarily, it never became a mass movement. The very people they were trying to help turned against them and said, no, this is not the way we want to be helped. We will not tolerate your agenda of trying to seize power by violence. And as everything is, the JVP is now a democratic party, and they have got the power that they were seeking and failing to achieve. Now, legitimately, and we must give them all our support, because that is what the Sri Lankan people decided, legally, legitimately, in one of the most peaceful elections I've seen. So we must pull together, as I said earlier, to support the national interest, support the people who have been elected by the people, for the people, of the people. They couldn't change
Go
anything.
on. What do you think of the drug traffickers, the underworld contractors, and the death sentence that is still available in Sri Lanka?
Yes, this is a very difficult question for me, because on two separate occasions I helped to bring GSP Plus back to this country, increasing our trade by about 4 to 5 billion and saving about 300,000 jobs. And on both occasions, one of the biggest hurdles we had to face was that GSP Plus is only given by the European Union, by the European Parliament, to friendly countries who do not have the death penalty, because there is a great antipathy towards the death penalty in Europe. The argument about being against the death penalty is that America has the death penalty and it hasn't stopped anything. People keep murdering each other, there are lots of drugs coming and going, and still the death penalty is in force. Whereas in Europe, where there is no death penalty, gun killings are so low, and drug problem is not as acute as in the United States. So does the capital punishment deter drug dealers? At a very human level, it should. But it only requires one drug leader to be executed to send a message to all the other drug dealers, like in Singapore. Don't do this. Maybe, as in Philippines, the then past president shot all the drug dealers. He is now being tried for human rights violations by the European Union and the International Criminal Court. But he did get rid of this scourge which is destroying the lives of our young people. So it's a very, very difficult question to answer.
Don't the young children, say below the age of 15, 16, don't they have their own human rights, the right to live properly? Don't they have that? And when these drugs are given to them, they lose their right to live properly, no? What do you think of that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are innocent and inexperienced and corrupted at an early age and hooked on drugs, and their entire lives are destroyed.
So don't you think that a message should be given by a few executions of these traffickers and contractors?
You know, it's a very funny thing. The other day I was reading something in the international press about somebody who had been abusing children. And this is it's a shock horror story that some man has been abusing young children. But drug dealers abuse children. And that is not connected. So you're absolutely right that people who deal and distribute drugs, especially to the young in schools and universities, are destroying their lives. And there should be a huge penalty. What it is up to the legal authorities and the Constitution and the Parliament of...
My question is this, the death penalty is still available in Sri Lanka, it has not been abolished.
Yes.
So, to protect at least the children.
Do you think, sorry, I take your point. Do you think that exercising capital punishment on drug dealers, now I don't mean some fellow in a schoolyard selling something to somebody, but I'm talking about a huge organized crime who actually bring these stuff in hundreds of thousands and or grams. Are you saying that one of them should enjoy the privileges of capital punishment, and that you think then other people will be deterred?
I'm asking you.
Probably.
Then shouldn't it be done?
It's not
for the protection of the children.
Yes, but it's not for me to say. It's
But,
for your parliament to say. But I can say that it will indeed be a deterrent and an example to the others. I am trying honestly to answer your question.
What I'm asking, what I asked you
I said yes.
is, what I'm asking you is to protect the children of this country.
Yes.
Don't you think that these people, at least one or two, should be executed?
You should know, because you deal with these bastards every day. You are one of the most prominent president's councils in the country, and you, I understand from talking to you, have first-hand experiences of these people. So what you have experienced, what your judgment is, what you feel, because you have heard them at first hand. I have never met any of these major gangsters, but you have, and you have had to exercise the law in the privileges that an attorney has been given, and you have, I think, otherwise you would not ask the question, come to the conclusion that one or two could serve as an example to stop it, like in Singapore, where there are very, very few little drugs, because if you get caught, you had it.
Yeah. Don't you agree with that?
We live in a
Reluctantly, because it goes against the principles I've explained earlier, I am willing to accept the notion that example setting might actually create the greater benefit, as long as we are 100% sure